Hello and welcome to Dub at the Cup, where we've just finished watching Spain qualify for the finals of the 2023 Women's World Cup, and it was certainly dramatic. And if it's going to be dramatic, we're going to have to talk about. Also going to have to bring in a really entertaining guest who's got something exciting to talk to us about, and that's Emily Husband, the new coach of the Central Coast Mariners, who are joining the Dub next season. Emily, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And Teo Pellizzeri, as always, is joining us. Teo, those final few minutes of that game, certainly hectic. Take me through your thoughts.
What a fantastic finish to the game. A great spectacle, and it sets the table beautifully for both the final and also the other semi-final. I'm going to throw it back to you both, Em and Pokuah. Did the better team win? Is the better team in the final? Pokuah, you can take this one first, and then Em, you can follow off Pokuah.
Oh, Teo, I wish you hadn't started with me. I think the better overall team are through to the final. They certainly play at their best. I think the best brand of football in this tournament. They certainly made it hard for themselves today. And I know I spoke about in the last pod maybe starting Alexia Putellas, and I think I'm going to have to hold my hand up and say take the L on that one, because the substitution they made in the end, I think, got them the win. And I think a deserved win, even though Sweden was certainly pushing in the early stages of that second half and the closing parts as well.
Yeah, I think, look, you've got to say that the better team arguably won there. Obviously, Spain absolutely dominated in terms of possession and chances created. There weren't that many shots on target, but, the number of passes that they put together in comparison to Sweden, suggests that, they did dominate good phases of the game and probably came out worthy winners.
And it wasn't unexpected to see numbers like Spain, 63% possession, more than 200 passes completed more than Sweden, but 78% pass accuracy to 62. So a bit of a gulf there. And those are just the numbers. What did that actually look like to you as you observed the game?
Yeah, look, they moved the ball really well. They got out into the wide areas really well and delivered some, really good, dangerous crosses. And for me, that was a big part of their dominance and being able to retain possession and move the opposition until those spaces opened up in those areas to then, go on and counter in the final third.
Now, before we talk about the goals, I wanted to touch on something Pokuah just raised, the substitution strategy, because we were both critical and praising the Spanish coach Jorge Vilda for taking Aitana off against the Netherlands, but of course he brought Salma on. And for the second game in a row, that has looked like an inspired sub. You take off the Ballon d'Or back-to-back winner, Alexia Putellas, before the hour mark, bring on Salma, and for all money, it looked as though her goal was going to be the winner. Navarro contributed, thankfully was not called offside, passive offside for Salma's goal. What have you made of Jorge Vilda's coaching through the tournament, but also the way he used his bench for this semi-final tonight?
Yeah, look, we talk quite often about impact players, and you can certainly see there that he knows the team really, really well. Because he's utilized that now a couple of times in a row, and it's come off. So it shows how well he does know those players and what their capabilities are. Well done for him for doing his homework.
Pokuah, you mentioned Putellas, not the biggest impact, 15 completed passes for the game, just the one successful dribble, did not connect across, and wasn't really a factor in front of goal. So the reputation had to take a backward seat on this one.
No, certainly. And I think the ACL injury for her, I think with the run-up that she had to this World Cup, I just didn't think it gave her enough time to be at her best and the level of football we've seen from her. Obviously, she's got 2 Ballon d'Ors. The second one maybe is a little bit, a little bit in contention, but we still know how special of a player she is. And I think less so about the bringing Parallelo on. I think also allowing Hermoso to drop deeper and not have to play so high, letting her get involved in the play more. I think that was one of the real benefits of taking Putellas off, who I think struggled, 15 passes only for however many minutes she played. It's just not a good enough output for a player in a semi-final.
Well, Em, I also wanted to ask you about Salma Paralolo. She scored 2 goals in a row off the bench. is she now in a role where you don't want to mess with that momentum, or do you have to think about starting her in the final, given that her finishing is incredible? This was an even better goal than the one that she scored against the Netherlands, and that one hit the inside of the post. You can't get much more pinpoint than the 2 goals she scored.
No, yeah, you know, like 2 fantastic finishes from her, so clinical. But you know, like I said before, having players that can come off the bench and change your game, and bring that threat to the opposition, for me, that's, you know, invaluable. So I think, you know, you'll probably see him continue to stick to that plan, going into the final, knowing that he's always got that weapon coming off the bench.
Now, let's talk about the Sweden equaliser, because Rebecca Blomqvist was totally unmarked. Lena Hurtig did what she does, a great target man play to bring the ball down for her from that high cross. And there had been some discussion about whether Ivana Andres would start this game. It was Leia Kadina who was next to Irene Paredes, who was always going to play. No Mappy Leon Pokuah, as we flagged before the tournament. And wouldn't Vilda have been just thinking, what have we got ourselves into, when Hurtig was able to win that header and there was no one within a 3-meter radius of Rebecca Blomqvist?
Yeah, no, I think that I was surprised the Hurtig substitution took as long as it did. I thought she was going to come on a little bit sooner. I think because we saw Stena Blackstenius, I think she was just struggling at times to really find her rhythm up front. I think it's just the cause of her playing so far up front by herself and not having enough players around her, that I think they just needed a little bit more support in their attacking phases of play at times, Sweden. And I think that's why they struggled to break, you know, and score as they scored obviously really late. I think they could have scored earlier had they made some earlier substitutions, their attacking wise.
Em, your thoughts on both Sweden's play, but also how the equaliser came about?
Yeah, I think, you know, again, sometimes you talk about, you know, players getting lucky in the box. You know, it's not often, you know, that you find yourself with that much space in the box, especially not at that time of the game. I think obviously probably from both aspects, both coaches will be a little bit disappointed with the lack of concentration in and around that area at such crucial times. Obviously Spain for the equaliser, but likewise then, you know, Sweden go on and get the equaliser, and Spain come on and get the winning goal within, was it 90 seconds of that goal going in. So yeah, you know, like I said, Spain showed their dominance through the possession, but you know, at the same time, Sweden still looked threatening when they did get the ball and did go forward, but I think at times they didn't get the numbers in the box that they needed. But again, what a finish.
Well, for a team that has built their brand on scoring from set pieces, and what went wrong for Sweden to concede from that set piece to the winning goal the way that they did?
I think again it comes down to concentration in those key moments. You know, like understanding that when, you know, you've just conceded or you've just managed to regain and become level, concentration in and around the box is so key, making sure that everyone's, you know, tight to the markers, and there's that dominance to try and win that first and second ball. You know, I think that's probably one area that's sort of let them down.
Now, the way the game has ended, Spain are through to the World Cup final. As you would know, Jorge Vilda was absolutely pilloried after the Euros for the way he managed his team, and they were overrun by England in the quarterfinals. Then you had the 15 players go on strike. Some of them never came back in protest of his management. As a coach, how does it leave you feeling to see this quite clearly divisive character now taking the team through to the World Cup final? Is this a situation where the players need to get the credit and the coach is simply steering them? Or is it time for a lot of Vilda's critics to say, hey, it's the World Cup final, maybe we need to reassess how we've judged the way this team has been run?
Yeah, I think you can look at it from one or two ways, right? Obviously, at the end of the day, you know, the Spanish players still decided that they were going to turn around and come into this World Cup, and you know, they've come and put their footprint in that. You know, yes, coaches have a huge dominance on the way that teams will play and how they'll come out tactically. But ultimately, the players are the ones that do it on the park. So, you know, again, you could go probably twofold with that. But you know, at the end of the day, they're representing their country, they're representing their badge, and you know, you always think that players will always give their very best effort just purely for that reason, regardless whether, you know, internal thoughts of the coach are.
I've got to ask Emily, for a coach, how do you go about, if the players have got a preconceived notion or they've got a perception, how do you go about maintaining squad harmony and getting them to push in a direction? Because clearly Jorge Vilda has done that in some sort of way, and getting this Spanish team to a World Cup final.
Look, it's part of professionalism, isn't it? You've got to sometimes put things aside and put what's important first. If you're committed to coming into a World Cup, you've got to have that professionalism around you, that you're doing this obviously for the representation of your country and for the football in your country, and for the young girls that are out there and playing. It's the same as when you're in a work environment. Sometimes you've got to put your personal feelings aside and do what's best for the team and for the nation.
On the other side, I guess for Sweden, leaving this World Cup at semi-finals, some disappointment at the Olympics as well. How do they assess their tournament? Do they say, what we've done really well, we've made it to the semi-finals, or are they feeling disappointment, saying this is an opportunity missed?
I mean, if you look at all the big teams that have already been knocked out in the World Cup, obviously, Germany, we didn't see that coming. They probably do see this as an opportunity missed, but I still at the same time, reaching the semi-final of the Women's World Cup, still an unbelievable achievement.
No, it certainly is. And Teo, with this Swedish side, there are obviously a lot of players who certainly into the latter parts of their career. Do you think that Sweden, in the same round, are they feeling like it's a missed opportunity, do you reckon, or are they comfortable?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there was 90 seconds between the equaliser and the goal that's now knocked them out of the tournament. And if it had gone to extra time, I'm sure some of those mental demons for the Spanish team may have crept in. Then again, they did beat the Netherlands in extra time, and maybe they've shown something a bit different in this tournament. But I mean, talk about generational change. Yeah, Sembrant, Jakobsen, Caroline Sager, all unused subs in this game. So the generational change is kind of already happening. I suspect there'll still be a top team, but I guess it's fine margins, Pokuah, between being a top team and being a team that wins Olympics and wins World Cups. And as Em said, with Sweden having already done the hard work to knock out the USA, and a number of other big teams falling by the wayside, this is as close as they're going to get for 4 years at least, and I think they will feel as though it's a big missed opportunity. Last one on this game that I wanted to ask you, Pokuah. Did you watch this through the lens of what can Australia exploit? Because I'm not going to spoil your answer by giving you my own, but I did see a few things in this game which, if Australia makes the final, we can be encouraged by.
Oh, that's so interesting. I don't think I watched the game like that. I think when I watched the extended, like the 25-minute cut down of this game, I'll probably maybe watch it in that way. But I do think that Spanish defense, they are still susceptible to goals, and I think that our wingers can certainly exploit that. And if you've got the likes of Van Egmond dropping into spaces and linking up with Ford or Rasso, whichever side she's using, I certainly think it's a opportunity for the Matildas to really exploit that Spanish defense, because goals look like they could sift through that.
It's funny because my big takeaway from this is that if it had been Caitlin Ford starting up top for Sweden instead of Stina Blackstenius, Spain wouldn't have played quite a number of the passes that they did, because they hung the ball out there and waited in possession in a way that the Australian press, as opposed to how Sweden defended without the ball, would make them far more vulnerable. So that's just one to put in the memory bank, of course. You're smiling because I remember when we had you on Dove Zone, you said once English, always English. And of course, Australia still has to play one of the best teams in the world to get to this final. And I think that's a nice little shift of gears to talk about the game tomorrow. We've finally arrived at that point. When I asked you back on Dove Zone, I wasn't entirely sure if we would get to this, but of course we were always going to get Australia versus England at this tournament. So before we talk about the actual football, at a personal level, are you chips in on England, or are you feeling even just 1% of allegiance to Australia at this point?
No, I think I'll always stick to, my nationality. You can't change that. I've been an England fan through and through since I was born. And so I'll thoroughly be sticking to them as a fan on Wednesday. But, at the same time, it's been an absolute joy to see how well the Matildas have done and what that's going to do for football in this country. So, there's always going to be a part of me that's going to will them on, just for the legacy that this is going to leave behind in this country, for the better of the female game.
It's been priceless having England in Terrigal, given that Central Coast is about to re-enter the A-League Women's. And we did hear from you on the KEEPUP platform earlier in the tournament when they had a training session which you attended. But what have you taken away from England being based on the Central Coast? And what are some of the things that'll stay with you, whether it's how they carry themselves, the actual coaching, the training sessions, just the setup and the apparatus around the team? What are some of the things that you'll be looking to take with you?
Yeah, look, the professionalism from top to bottom of the group has been fantastic to watch from the outside. Obviously, you know, like I said, we've been to a couple, you know, the open training session, and you know the way that they've dialogued with the club, and you know, I think how grateful they've been as well, with everything that's been provided with them, and how thankful they've been of how welcoming everyone on the Central Coast has been. You know, it just goes to show it doesn't matter how big you are, that you know gratitude goes a long way. So I'll be certainly taking that as well.
And the donation of sporting equipment as well. I mean, this World Cup, some stories like that feel as though they happened a year ago, when it was only a couple of weeks. But what does that say about sort of, when we talk about legacy, it can take any form, but that's tangible. That's right there, and it's hugely beneficial.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely massive. And, you know, for us as a brand new women's program coming in, again, that's going to be a lasting legacy that's going to be with us, that we build the foundations of our group on. And, you know, every player that I speak to, it's for them, you know, what a fantastic opportunity to come in and have some world-class equipment, you know, to use right from day one, as a brand new, you know, team coming in. So we're incredibly grateful for the Lionesses leaving that behind, and I'm looking forward to getting in there myself.
Now, obviously, we know that you're going to be supporting the Lionesses, but for us, you know, supporting the Matildas, something that we've been thinking about the whole tournament is Sam Kerr. And is Sam Kerr going to start? Is she not going to start? And what are your thoughts about her potentially starting against the Lionesses tomorrow?
Look, it's going to be a tough decision for Tony to make. You know, for me, I think you look at how well the Matildas have done without Sam, and well, I say without Sam, obviously she's still in and around the training group. She'll still have a real big leadership role, and you see the energy that the team gets off of her coming on as a sub. And for me, I think, you know, why change something that's not broken? You know, personally, I think she has value coming off the bench. And the players around her have shown that they can stand up and, you know, and do well. You know, whether she comes off the bench or whether she starts. So yeah, I probably wouldn't change what's not broken.
No, so I will have to take that with a grain of salt, because obviously you want the Lionesses to win. But I actually agree with you on your point about Sam Kerr. I think that, you know, she's such a great spark off the bench, and with the starting 11 doing as well as they've done, you know, throughout this tournament. You know, as you said, why fix something that's not broken? But for the Lionesses, what are the strengths you think they can use to exploit the Matildas? And on the other side as well, what do you think the strengths are for the Matildas that they could have really hurt the Lionesses?
I think obviously something that you know, England are always going to bring to the table is our, you know, dominance on the ball. You know, we move the ball well, from front to back, from back to front third. So you know, through the likes of Kira Walsh, and Ella Toon, and obviously Georgia in there as well. So I think in that central area, that'll be an area that we'll look to continue to dominate. You know, what system we'll go with tomorrow, that's obviously up to the boss. I think both systems can have big pros and cons. But you know, I certainly think if she sticks with Rousseau and Hemp up top again, they can cause real problems for you know, the likes of Claire Hunt, who's, you know, still a young defender learning a trade on the world stage.
Let's talk about the defence at the other end, because England's defence has garnered a lot of praise. Obviously, the loss of Leah Williamson's ability and leadership was always going to be crucial, and Millie Bright was battling time to get fit for the tournament, and has proven to be so. What's your assessment of how England have defended? And when we head into tomorrow with, you know, Bright, Carter, Bronze, Greenwood, that's what we're expecting. But do you think there could be surprises, or do you think England will go with what has worked for them up to this point?
I think that they'll probably stick with what they've gone with. You know, like I think obviously, again, depending on what system we go with, that'll sort of give you a bit of an insight into, you know, how we're going to look to utilize the game plan. But you know, I'm looking for Millie Bright to come in and just assert a dominance right from the first minute. You know, she's fantastic athlete, and you know, she's so strong in challenges, and she brings that presence with her. So I think, you know, from, you know, despite the fact that you know, we've got key players missing, I think there's definitely players within the group that have, you know, stood up to the challenge as well.
Now, I know Serena Wiegman is in rarefied air and it may be difficult to question her decisions, right? So I'm going to preface this by saying, using Rachel Daly the way she has, how do you feel about it, playing her as a defender rather than as a forward?
It's really hard to tell. Obviously, Daly's just come off the back of a WSL season where, you know, she scored, it was 16 goals in as many games. So she's proving that she can do it in and around the best players in the world. So for me, I think there's still an element there that Rachel should be used higher up the pitch. But, you know, again, in the system that we played with a 3-5-2, Daly gets into those, you know, higher areas and the wider areas as opposed to playing at fullback. You know, so I think she's utilised better as a wing back, because it does allow her to get forward and it does allow her to get in the box, obviously, as we saw.
Now, Rachel Daly is certainly one of the players I really enjoyed watching in the last WSL season. But something that I'm actually looking forward to in this matchup is the midfield battle, because I think that's where the game is going to be won or lost. And it's really Georgia Stanway, Kira Walsh taking on Katrina Gorry and Kyra Cooney-Cross. When you look at that matchup between those four, how do you think that plays out? And what do you think the key things we need to be looking out for in that battle?
Yeah, I think you know, again, you know, something that's been spoke highly about is the amount of ground that the Matildas have covered in this World Cup. You know, it's been outstanding, especially Katrina Gorry. You know, she's been in there. She's worked so hard for that team, and you can see that she's developed that box to box midfielder. But you know, then you have Georgia Stanway, who has a you know, a very similar style as well. So I think that'll sort of be one of the really good matchups between them two to see, you know, who wins those battles. But again, like I said, I think, you know, something we do tend to do is we look after the ball well, you know, going through that middle area. So I think it's something that we can, you know, look to exploit.
Now, you are managing in club football, and as we've seen international tournament football, in terms of fatigue levels, you know, adrenaline can be very different. What are your thoughts on how Australia has narrowed the focus, though? I think only 15 players used for the tournament. Certainly, there's been concerns about in-game substitutions, but also the energy levels and the amount of fatigue. What's been your read on Australia's run to this point? Because I do think they'll be walking on air and the crowd is going to lift them and adrenaline will play a big role. But how do you see it from your point of view?
Well, England did the very similar thing in the Euros. You almost use that home advantage as your 12th player. You know, we didn't change our formation or the starting 11 throughout the whole of the Euros, and went on to win it, and obviously got all the way through the tournament. And so, you know, yes, there's been some sort of games, obviously, for Australia, gone into extra time. That fatigue will start to set in in those later periods of the game. Maybe that's a point where, you know, Tony will look at his bench and go, look, maybe now is the time. But, you know, it's proven that when you have a group of players that, you know, in international football that don't get much opportunity to play with each other before coming into a big tournament like this, if you can find a system and you can find a combination that works, you know, you've got every reason to stick with that unless you have injuries.
Now, something that I'm curious about as a spectator from home is that I hear so many players talk about how much like the atmosphere of the fans can lift players. What does it like actually do? Like, how does it feel when you're out there and you can hear the supporters? Do you feel like you're invincible out there? How does that work?
Yeah, I think sometimes players are more inclined to take risks. You know, like when they know they've got the backing of somebody, you know, a whole stadium, and you know, like I said, the crowds have been phenomenal in this Women's World Cup. And when you can hear them behind you as you're driving forward with the ball, sometimes you find that extra energy within you to make that one more sprint or that quicker run that you might not have had or found it within you to do previously. So I think there's something definitely there. I think there's a reason, if you look back over the history of the world game, whether that's men's or women's, that you know, the countries that hold the World Cups and the Euros, do have that bigger advantage, and they are more inclined to come out with a World Cup win. You know, you look at the only two things that we've ever won in England with the men's in the '66, and we held that World Cup, and obviously the Euros last year, and we held that. So it shows what difference having that home crowd can really do to a team.
Just quickly, what do you think it would mean for England to join the honour roll of Women's World Cup winners? Because it's a much shorter one than the men's. It's Japan, the United States, Norway, and Germany. And so it'd be England and Germany as the only two countries to have won a men's and a women's World Cup. Now, of course, England, you know, invented and exported the game, and there's that feeling of, you know, football's coming home. But how much would it vindicate, given that you've grown up in the English system and you've probably encountered just as much, if not more, sort of, you know, discrimination against women's football as anyone? There's so many stories out there that are like that. What would it mean to be world champions and to add England to that honour roll?
Oh, it'd be absolutely massive. I think it'd be huge for the country. It'd be huge for the sport. You know, and again, you talk about, you know, the women's game. We went through a period where women couldn't play football, and to bounce back from that now, and you know, to get the crowds that we're getting, and to start getting the funding that they deserve, are only positive steps in the female game. So, you know, for the nation, and, you know, we're already a football mad country. We're a one sport country. So, you know, for me, it's more than deserving. And I think it's something that we'll continue to build on from this point onwards. You know, some of the girls RTCs and some of the young players that are coming through our young England squads on both the men's and the women's side have been, you know, really, really good. We're looking at, you know, the way that the whole country has changed its, you know, its system and its philosophies, and what that's doing to these younger players coming through. So I think our future is really bright, regardless of what the outcome of this World Cup would be. But of course, who wouldn't love to see us win the World Cup, apart from the Australians, of course.
Yes, and the Spanish now. Pokuah, we gave our tips yesterday, but you've had 24 hours. I still think it'll be Australia on penalties after a 0-0 draw. Are you willing to change your tip, Pokuah, or are you going to stick with England making the final?
No, you see, you've put me into a bad spot because now I sound like I'm not on the Matildas train, but I think I'm still going to have to stick with the Lionesses, just because I've seen them, and I've seen them in the biggest moment excel. So, you know, I would love the Matildas to do it, but I'm still going to have to stick with the Lionesses getting the win in extra time.
Em, if you can give us an impartial prediction, give us your score and your thoughts on who is going to win and why.
I think England will take the win. I think they'll win 2-1, similar sort of a game to what we saw on Saturday, where, you know, again, the key moments can be decided sometimes through, you know, the crowd getting behind the Matildas, or, you know, little bits of lack of concentration. But I think both teams will score, and I think England will come out as 2-1 winners.
It'd actually be awesome to have an Australia game where both teams score, because the Nigeria game was something special. So I don't want it to be one-way traffic. I would love to see that happen. While we've got you, of course, you are going to be coaching the Central Coast Mariners in the Liberty A-League this season. If you're 16 and under, you can go to the Liberty A-League for free. Go to keepup.com.au/LAP for the Liberty A-League pass. That's keepup.com.au/LAP. If you're in the Central Coast, you're already the men's champions of the A-League. So get along and support your women's team as they enter the competition after a decade's absence. It's fantastic to have you back. Now, you will be absolutely thrilled, Em, because Annabelle Martin, one of the players that you have publicly announced as having signed, is working in the media at the World Cup, and I ran into her at England versus Colombia, and I quizzed her, and she gave me nothing. So next time you see her, say, well done, you've learned how to keep all the secrets in-house. But of the players you have signed, it's obviously hugely exciting to see Rolla Badawia, who was one of the guests that we had on Dub at the Cup, sign up. Izzy Gomez, promising young midfielder. Peter Trimmis, who you and I were both there when she scored an amazing goal for the Bulls Academy against your Sydney Uni team during the NPL season. And I think a little bit like Daniela Galich and Sienna Saveska last season, Peter Trimmis is going to explode into the league this season, and everyone's going to know her name. So based on how the slow announcement of signings is going, how are you feeling about the squad that you're putting together?
Yeah, it's been a really, you know, really good process, really exciting process. You know, like I think like you want to try and build good foundations there for the future, and those younger players that we've got coming, you know, in on those scholarships. You know, you're looking at those being the future, and you're looking at giving them those opportunities. Obviously, there's a fair few players in there that I know and I've worked with before. I think it's always good to have players around you as well, you know, that you have worked with, and you do know what you can get out of them, as well as them bringing in a few new faces. And you know, obviously we've still got a few more signings to announce, and they'll be coming out over the next, you know, week or two. You know, it's just a really exciting time for us. I'm just itching to get back on the park, to be honest.
I've just got to ask, Emily, when you're building this squad, obviously you've got to think about the local players, but you've also got to think about your visa spots. And obviously Roller's got one of your visa spots at the moment. How do you go about deciding who you take to fit with the squad that you have to make you as competitive as you can be in the next season?
It's like, you know, it's like putting together a jigsaw in a lot of senses. You know, you look at attributes, key attributes that players have, and who's going to complement who, and what you've already got within the squad, and what you can look to add to that. So, you know, for me, that's you know, one of the key things that you've kept looking for when you're recruiting players. You're looking at, okay, have they got these specific attributes that you want that will help the way that you're going to play in season, and could give you the adaptability that you need as well.
Is it a case of, when you're looking for international players, are you looking for players that are younger that you can help develop, or are you trying to go with players who are more established so they can make an immediate impact on your squad?
I think there needs to be a mix of both. It's, you know, I think the league's always going to have, you know, a thirst for young players to give them those opportunities. But ultimately, young players only learn off those more experienced players. So they really have a key holding within the team. So it is important that you get, you know, some older players in and around, so these, you know, younger players can learn from them.
One of the amazing things about the A-League Women's is the it can be me factor of seeing players that are 16, 17 playing in the competition. And, you know, so many young players are going to be picking up a ball for the first time, or just motivated to play a lot more than they currently are off the back of this World Cup. So tell us about your scholarship players, Peter Trimmis, Maya Lobo. They've both played for Australia at youth level, but also Tess Quilligan, who's a player that you've had a very hands-on role with in your NPL coaching at Sydney University.
Yeah, obviously both Maya and Peter have had experience, you know, in the young Matildas, and they've gone away and had that tournament experience. And they both this year are also getting experience of playing in a senior setup, after both leaving the institute and going, you know, into first grade teams in the New South Wales NPL. So they're starting to gain that senior exposure in the NPL this year, and I think, you know, they're ready for that next step up. And you know, similar to Tess, you know, Tess is somebody that, you know, I've known since she started playing football at Sydney University. I've seen her all the way through her, you know, footballing career so far, and she's just a player that just won't stop until you know, she's got everything right. And she'll train the house down, you know, by herself in a team environment. You give her a ball, she'll have it stuck to her feet.
Now, no pressure here, but I mean, the men are the A-League champions, and Nick Montgomery has done a phenomenal job identifying his international signings. I was commentating the Australia Cup at the weekend where Mikhail Doka, the new Brazilian, made his debut, and he looks like a great signing already, and Marco Tullio is one of the top players in the league. And even though they've lost a few players over the summer, the Central Coast Mariners men have really picked the eyes out with who they've scouted. Does that build the pressure a bit for you with the internationals you're going to commit to bringing in, or can you actually even lean on the process, maybe not the scouting network, but the process that a Nick Montgomery uses with the way he's put together his men's team?
Yeah, it's certainly a conversation that I've had with, you know, both Monty and Serge about, you know, around, you know, what it is that they look for. And, you know, they've been really, really supportive throughout this whole process as well. You know, sort of given that time up to have conversations with me and inviting me into training and being in and around that environment. You know, they've been so supportive. And, you know, you've only got to look at, you know, the players that they lost this year and where they've gone. You know, they've not gone to other A-League teams. They've gone off to Europe, you know, and signed for, you know, whether it's championship teams, whether it's, you know, Spanish teams. that's fantastic to see, because it shows you that, they're recruiting really well, but then they're also developing players well to push them onto the next, into that next tier.
Last one on the Mariners. We touched on earlier about what you'd been observing and learning from the England camp. So when you get the group back in and the World Cup circus has left town, but we're hoping the shine and the halo is still being absorbed in football around the country, is there something, be it a value, be it a characteristic, be it a trait, which you will be looking to implement on your Mariners team as a result of having had this World Cup experience in Australia?
Yeah, of course. You look at how all the teams have approached this World Cup, wanting to go out and get at teams from the first minute, and wanting to go and cause problems. And, there's been some really, really exciting games of football. And for me, as a spectator, that's what you want to see. You want to see teams that are going out to look for those 3 points week in, week out, with an exciting attacking style of football. And that's something that we're certainly looking at bringing to the table at Central Coast. And building a brand new squad, bringing a whole group of players together for the first time is it's a really exciting challenge. But I think it's just about getting the girls in and getting them to know each other as quickly as they possibly can do. And we're really looking forward to that.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to seeing the Central Coast Mariners will be welcomed back into the A-League Women's. I think it's going to be a fantastic season. So on that note, I think thank you for joining us on Dub at the Cup today, and good luck for the upcoming A-League Women's season.
Thank you very much.
And Teo, appreciate you joining me once again. And hopefully the Matildas get the win like you're saying.
Well, I will be in the stadium tomorrow, Pokuah, and we're going to be back outside the venue after full time doing the instant reaction, win or lose. So make sure you follow Dove at the Cup. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, because that's where you'll get the live video reaction as soon as we can after full time, whether that's after 90 minutes, 120 or penalties. It's going to be a memorable night no matter what happens, Pokuah, and I can't wait to get out to Stadium Australia tomorrow.
Certainly, and hopefully the Matildas can help us do the double on the English. We got the Ashes, now we just need the World Cup win. But on that note,
our guest is still here, Pokuah. Have some manners.
We won the Ashes. We just got to say it. But to catch all the latest news about the Women's World Cup, you can find us on keepup.com.au, and you can find us on KEEPUP on all social media platforms. And to listen back to this podcast, you can find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But I've been Pure Frimpong. Thank you for joining us.